And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 282. So today we're talking about a kind of embedded insider photography shoot that I did with Phil Crennell, who's a woodsman, artist, furniture maker. And yeah, so we're going to be going through the photos, talking about some of the decisions that were being made for that shoot. If you happen to be watching live, leave a comment. Let me know you're here. And if you click like, do the subscribe, all that usual kind of thing, and we can make a start. Yeah, so welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 282. Well, today is also Mother's Day, so I probably won't have quite so many people turning up because you may well all be quite busy with your mothers, or some kind of other celebrations. There's also the I'm also aware that the the clocks, while they changed in North America, still haven't changed here in the UK. So I imagine that will probably catch a few people out, at least for this week and the next as well. 2 weeks' time, we should be back in sync with those in the North America as well. But meanwhile, if you do happen to be watching live, then leave a comment. Let me know you're here. Say hi. Tell me where you are. Tell me what the weather's doing. And we can kind of make a start. I do have a couple of comments in. Adagos, which is Anton, I believe, says, howdy, good folks. And Meg has joined us and said, hello, everyone. Now, this is unusual to actually be starting this podcast and only have two people live commenting. So if there's anybody who's just lurking a bit, thinking about joining in or saying hello, now's a good time to do it. Oh, Janet's joined us from a messy Mississauga. Some combination of snow / freezing rain / high winds and temperatures of +1. Wow. That does sound a bit messy. Oh, Fiji's joined us and says, good evening, everyone. Janet just said she was busy typing. Okay, well, that's good. I feel slightly happier now knowing that we've got a few people in. So yes, if you happen to, like I say, if you're enjoying it already, well, if you can click the like anyway, then that kind of, hopefully helps the algorithms, helps YouTube remind other people who might be watching YouTube at the moment that something live is going on, cropping up in their feed. You never know, we might get a couple of extra viewers that way. Right, so what are we talking about? So yes, happy Mother's Day to mothers, stepmothers, grandmothers, daughters, sons of mothers, all the rest of it. Anyway, here in the UK, it's Mother's Day. I think in North America, it tends to be later in the year. Not sure how it is around the rest of Europe. Viji says she's had a busy day trying out headshots. Now that's impressive. That I'm looking forward to, because next week, and I'll remind everybody again at the end of the podcast, next week we have the headshot challenge. For 2 weeks ago, I did the whole podcast all about headshots. And so yes, the headshot challenge. No, hang on a sec, do that the other way. Last week I talked about headshots, and in 2 weeks' time, we've got the headshot challenge. Is that right? Suddenly I'm full of doubts as to quite which way round this has gone. Yes, I think that's right. Okay, so that's great to see that. Yes, BG, if you're practicing headshots already, that's fantastic. Really looking forward to seeing what you might come up with. VG says, thank you, Kim. In India, we celebrate on the 10th of May. Is that Mother's Day, is it? Excellent. Okay, cool. Right, so what are we going to be talking about today then? So today then is about Phil Crennell. Now, hang on a sec, we've got, John Harvey's joined us from Ohio and says hello all. So yes, today we're talking about Phil Crennell, and this is, it's not that I'm necessarily expecting everybody here to have heard of him. He's not a kind of globally famous name or anything like that, but locally he's well known, and he is an artist, a furniture maker and a woodsman, and a fascinating character. And the thing is about this shoot is this was along what I've called before kind of like embedded photography or insider photography. And the idea with this is that you don't just it's not like you just go in and take photos of that kind of documentary style, very popular with National Geographic, where you're going in and looking at an exotic other. Here are these other people with their funny little costumes and ways and weird lives, and they're not us. And it's filtered through very often a kind of white male Western perspective that sees the world as other. And I've never really liked that very much. And many years ago, there was a particular photographer I knew who travelled the world on his bicycle. And he had this amazing ability to capture other people as us in another guise. And it didn't matter how exotic or otherworldly the outfits, the faces, the people, the landscapes, anything else which was so far removed from my experience here in Scotland. Somehow these people just felt like people I would know, that if I got to know them, I could sit down, have a cup of tea with them, and we would get on well. And I love that notion of how he did that. And part of this then is what I've started to do. I've done it several times now over the last couple of years, and I think in fact, even within this podcast, if you go back to episode 259 last year, when I did a set of photography for Firelight Trio, when they were rehearsing and when they were recording, so it's a band coming up to their album. And a few weeks ago, I talked about the actual album cover. But before that, when they were doing their rehearsing and they were doing the recording. And if we go back to episode 225, I talked about the artists Lucy and Ed, where this was the first time I think I really talked a lot about this concept. And the idea is what I'm doing is I spent a day with them, and it's kind of immersed in the photo shoot. So it's not coming in and shooting at something else. It's being a part of and sort of shooting from the inside. So what happens here is that I know these people. I've got to know these people. I've built a relationship with these people. And then because the day you're photographing them across the day, you're photographing processes and you're photographing having a cup of coffee and you're photographing all sorts of things, you just kind of become part of the scenery. And sometimes, of course, you're constantly interacting with them, chatting away. But there's a relaxation that happens because you're not seen as a threat. You're not seeing somebody where you've got to stick on your best behaviour because there's somebody around with a camera, all that kind of thing. What actually happens is people relax with you and they kind of get on with their day and you're chatting, period. And sometimes you see something interesting and maybe you set up a little bit of a shot. You go, oh, well, this would be a really good one. Could you just kind of move around there or go back to what you were doing there? Because I thought that was fun and I just missed it. And that's fun. And that, and it's very relaxed. And because it's relaxed, you get these shots which feel natural. They feel much more like you are there. Because as viewers, when you view the photographs, you're viewing it through the photographer's eyes. And instead of viewing it through the photographer's eyes of, oh, look at this weird exotic place I'm in, you're viewing, here I am with people who I'm comfortable with. And what I'm trying to do is just show you what their processes are, the kind of life they live. But at the same time, and this is the really interesting bit as a photographer as well, developing your photography skills, is that there's all these opportunities to do lots of different styles of photography. So you can do the kind of wide shot, establishing shots, if you like, where you are, where you can see the whole scene. You can do the close-up shots. You can do the individual workers' hands at work doing things. You can do the pouring the cup of tea or the staring out the window. That there's a whole mass of different kind of genres and subgenres and everything else that go into creating these photos. And so that opportunity for you to spend a day with somebody, a full long day, because it means that what you would usually do, you run out of very quickly. If you're used to photographing faces, after the half an hour, a couple of hours, you run out, you kind of almost get bored of just photographing faces. You want to try something else. And then you notice a rusty kettle sitting on a windowsill somewhere. So you go, oh, that's a bit interesting. So maybe you take a photo of that. And it's that kind of thing whereby you end up with this range of photos. And what that does is, whilst each individual photo is this a good photo? You end up with a larger story, a story of what this person or these people were like across the course of the day, across the part of their lives, when they stopped worrying about the photographer being there and just started to kind of get on with things. And it gives you a different mood and a different feel, but it also gives you something which is kind of a little bit more, I was going to say cinematic but or documentary TV kind of thing, where it's not just the single image, it's the multitude of images which together create a much larger picture, an idea of what's going on. And it's a really fun thing to do. And I would desperately, not desperately, but really sincerely recommend you try this. Start thinking, do you know somebody? Do you know, I mean, you could be an artist, but it could also be a plumber or a car mechanic. Do you know somebody who just, kind of makes things? Or fixes things? Is there somebody that you could just spend the day with, who you kind of already got a bit of a relationship with, and they wouldn't really mind you just going around with a camera, and see what kind of collection of images you can build up? And this is what it's really about. And so this is what I was doing with Phil. Now, Phil turned 80 last year, I think. Oddly enough, 80 doesn't feel as old as it used to. When I was younger, 80 was so old. Now I'm going to be turning 60 later this year. 80 doesn't feel as old. I mean, I first met Phil, I don't know, probably about 15-ish years ago, something like that. So at that point, he'd been about 65. Closer to the age I am now, and at that point you're not thinking of, and then of course you know people and they get older, age stops being the thing. But I don't know how long ago, whether it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, basically he bought this plot of woodland in probably about 10 miles down the road from where I live here in southwest Scotland, and he built a hut in it and he lived in it, and then he sort of extended out and built other huts, and he's had vehicles in there which he's turned into Airbnbs, and then he's kind of moved through that phase, and then he built a large place which he could live in, and also had workshops attached to it as well. And he creates furniture, amongst other things. He creates furniture, but the furniture he makes is taken from wood, from the forest and from the woodlands in which he lives, or sometimes people drop off and hand to him or what have you. But the point is it's all sustainable. A lot of it is stuff that's blown down in storms, or stuff that naturally had to be thinned out anyway. It's not stuff that where the trees were grown specifically for turning into wood products. And he's got an incredible eye where he takes the shapes of the natural wood and then incorporates them into the furniture. And so basically I spent a day with Phil and took photos of his processes, took photos of us having a cup of coffee, and just kind of getting that general sense. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. Right. Couple more questions, comments rather. Oh, Marilyn's joined us from a snowy, cold Colorado. Marcy joins us, says, good morning, everyone. And Lisa says, hello from a cloudy, cool Maryland. Excellent. We're getting more people in. So yes, quick reminder to those who've just joined us, if you can click like on the video, I think it helps the algorithms show us to a few more people on YouTube. Obviously, if you don't like this, don't feel that you have to like it. There's no kind of guilt-inducing guilt trip or anything like that. Just, it's useful. Some actually, the more observant of you might notice that the light has changed in the background here. I am taking a little bit of a gamble. After a couple of months of using big side light over on that side of the room, I have opened the blinds and I have natural daylight coming through the window, which is the way I operate across most of the summer. But as it gets dark, generally speaking, by 3 o'clock, we've lost it's too much light. But it's currently sunny at the moment. I think it's going to stay light enough for the hour or thereabouts. So I'm going to take this. If it gets too dark, somebody say, look, you're disappearing out here, and I'll go and stick the light on. Right, okay. So let's tell you, let me just tidy up my little desktop here a little bit, and then what I can do is I can show you some of these photos. So if I click that over there and then move that to there, and of course, you can carry on If you've got questions, if you've got thoughts, if you've got comments, that kind of stuff, then please leave them. Type into the, if you are watching live, then you can put them into the live chat, and then I'm able to see them and respond in real time. If you're watching the recording of this, you can still leave comments and thoughts and insights and ideas and reflections down in the general comments. YouTube generally notifies me something that's has been written, so I will be able to read them later, possibly respond. It's just that I can't respond in real time, obviously, if it's the recording. So what we're going to do here then is I'll click over to this one first and show you what was. Now this is the photo I've just kind of created as, if you like, the establishing shot. This is the cover card for this episode 282. And I kind of chose this one. This was, of the photos I took, it's not the first photo I took of the day. I'd been there for about, I don't know, an hour and a half or something like that when I took this photo. But the thing is when I got home and I was looking through the photos, I wanted to just grab one to kind of play a little bit and sort of establish almost an editing style to go with it. And I like this one. In a way, this photo sort of sums up a degree of Phil, what he does, how he does it. So what you're seeing here is, so we've got Phil, he's got a chainsaw, he's cutting a piece of wood. He's not wearing some mask, he's not wearing chainmail shin guards, he's doing it freehand, he's just wearing his glasses, he's resting it on a gas canister. This is a bit where, modern day health and safety, what have you, if he was employed somewhere, he'd probably be fired for doing this. But what we're talking about here is a guy who's 80 years old, who's been doing this all his life, is on his own grounds, is doing his own thing, and, he's got, if he can't be safe doing this, then there's no hope, no amount of, facial coverings and shin guards and all the rest of it are going to make any difference. This notion that what you can see here though is that, so you've got that sort of starting to get that sense of that Phil is very much his own man, but you've also got the space here. You've got you can see the woodland in the background. You can also see there's a bit of a caravan mobile home there, which I think sometimes if people come and stay, they can stay in that. But you can also see that we've got a wood pile, we've got a wood shed here, which has got a tarpaulin coming out and, a framework and what have you. So that all these offcuts of wood and pieces of created wood are all kind of sitting under shelter to dry out. So we've also got a water butt over here on the left. Obviously capturing rainwater. So if you spend a little bit of time with this photo, it really starts to allow you to, you can start to unpack various aspects of Phil and his life. And then from a photographic point of view, from a camera playing around with the, composition and what have you, what we have is, I'm kind of using the notion of the diagonals again. We have this diagonal of the piece of wood that's being cut. We've also got the diagonal of the frame behind. And both of these are coming up to Phil's body. Phil is bent over. We've got the diagonals with the chainsaw in his arm and the way his head is bent down. And of course, what I've talked about on many occasions and will continue to talk about is the notion of the use of diagonals in composition. That diagonals add an energy and a movement, and when you've got really strong verticals and horizontals and what have you in a shot, these things create stability and a sort of sense of calmness or rigidity. Whereas when you add a diagonal, strong diagonal or series of strong diagonals into an image, it adds energy, it adds movement, and so when you want to kind of ramp up that sense of energy, you look for including a stronger sense of diagonals into your image. When you want to calm it down, you emphasize more the kind of horizontals and the verticals. So this is the opening shot, gives you a sense of what's going on. Okay, so let's flick on to another shot here. And here we've got, you know, this is just, I've moved around a bit. This is Phil selecting a piece of wood. Here you can see that gas canister down the bottom on the left there, and the water butt. So you can tell that I was just the other side of that when I took the last shot. But this gives you a better sense of like one of his many kind of log sheds that he's got dotted around the grounds. And you can see all these pieces of wood that have been cut and carved, and these are all kind of waiting to be, you know, drying out, waiting to be made into something suitable as and when it occurs. And what's lovely about this is it's not just the kind of, you know, it's not the clean, smooth planks, though there are some of those. What you can also see is there's a lot of burrs, there's a lot of, you know, edges of wood and what have you, where you've got, you know, that the round. It's not about, you know, 90 degrees. It's not the kind of stuff you go and buy from the hardware store where everything's, you know, your 2x4, your you know, you're so wide and so long. It's about creating pieces of wood, but you're including the sides, you're including the misshapen, which of course isn't misshapen. It's only misshapen if you're wanting something actually straight. It's actually just shaped, if you like, naturally. So I think this shot here helps to give that sort of sense of you know, well, the woodshed, the man picking out a piece of wood. This shot, so that very same kind of woodshed that we were looking at is over here in the distance. Here I am on the other side, you know, back across the kind of garden area. This large building in the middle here is his kind of key place. So this is where he lives, but he's also got a workshop inside on the other side of the building. He's also got a workshop over to the left here as well, outdoor workshops. And you really start to get a sense of, you know, and you can see the trees around. And you know, this is kind of his place. This is, if you know, you're walking around the building, you've stepped out of the building, you're in the woods, you turn around, you look back, this is kind of what you see. So what's Marcy said? Marcy said it's referred to as a living edge. Ah, right, okay, the living edge of the tree. Yeah, perfect, thank you. Now, interestingly, I mean, the thing is, actually, what I'll just go back to say to this, actually, this is built by Phil. You know, this building is built by Phil. Phil, I mean, he's a craftsman, he's a woodsman, he's not just furniture. I mean, this guy has built all the huts and the buildings that are on the grounds as well. And that includes this kind of wonderful tree house, really. So this is, you can just about see here, I've only got the low res versions coming up. Maybe I should have done the high res ones, but it's attached to you know, about 4 trees or something like that are you know, around it, and then it's built on stilts, and you walk up these steps, and then you've got a door entrance here, and then this level here inside there's a little sink unit, little gas cooker, table and chair, and then there's a little steep ladder that goes up, and then actually in this top part under the roof is a bed, a mattress and a little bit of a bedroom. So, you know, it's a great place to come and stay. What's Marcy said? Marcy said loves the Rover conversion. Now, yeah, the Land Rover here, this conversion, I don't think that's not Phil's. That was, now was it Ed's or Shawnee's? I can't remember. That was somebody else's who lives on I think that was Ed's, who comes and works on, does a lot of work in the grounds. It was his. So yeah, so this you know, you can see again, you've got the gas bottle down here, and you know, there's a whole place here for stacking wood, keeping it dry underneath, and it, you know, it's absolutely incredible. Went inside with Phil on this, and it becomes this kind of little dream home, this little dream escape where you can just kind of imagine just going and plonking yourself in there with a good book. Really escape the world. Yeah, something kind of very romantic about that. So yeah, this shot then, you know, that's, you know, Phil walking towards it. He was then showing me around the place. I just trying to get that sense of this place in the woods. This here is your toilet, your outhouse. you know, literally outhouse, the house outside. Compost toilet in here. And again, though, it's that wonderful attention to detail that Phil doesn't just take 2x4s and put them all together and everything else. Everything is created, you know, with an artist's eye. And I just, you know, what, even an outhouse, you know, so fine, it's got the corrugated iron roof and what have you, and there's, you know, proper struts and everything. But, you know, you look at the kind of the railing, and its branches kind of put there to create, you know, and it's really beautiful. It's these little touches. You kind of feel, you know, rustic is one word, but you know, it's also, you're sort of toying into that kind of fantasy fairy tale kind of thing, even just for an outhouse. And I love that about Phil. I love that about, you know, his creation. VG says, beautiful shot with the man walking. Thank you. This shot here is actually in the woods. And so one of the pathways going up the woods. So this is his dog, Wally. And so large chunk of the wood here, and where it's really quite dark. And we can see chopped down trees and stuff clearing in here. But essentially it's a very dense piece of part of the wood, and where it's been cut down where you've got the path going through it, there's you know, light just above you, and so you end up with this really kind of dark surrounds, but this lovely kind of trail of light that's sort of running through here. Who's joined? Oh, that's Robert says, howdy all from a sunny and mild North Texas. Welcome, Robert. So glad you could make it along. So this kind of shot then is, you know, so we're getting a sort of sense of the woods, the surrounds, the kind of the place in which he lives and works. But it's back to this notion of when you're spending the day there, you get the chance to really explore and try out different kinds of photography. You know, it's that notion of kind of multi-genre. Do you want to, you know, you can have a go at doing landscape, you can have a go at doing portrait, you can have a go at doing documentary, you can have a go at doing detailed macro. That there's always something else to be looking. You can even have a go at pet portraits if you want, because there's dogs there. So there's always options. There's always something to play with. And when you're there for the whole day, you can really start exploring, and it gives you a real chance to kind of try different things out. Now, like any of these things, not everything works, but that doesn't matter. You've got the opportunity. You know, that you might be there, you might take 1,000 photos across the day. Maybe you're only looking for a couple of dozen, which are going to be the ones that are the keepers that really work. But well, the ones that do work have a much greater chance of working because you're in this environment where people are relaxed. VG says the forest looks so rustic and the green looks so beautiful. Quite lucky to have such nature trails close by. I mean, we've also got here is the fact that it is green. We live in a wet part of the world here. Yet talking of the notion of pet portraits, this is Wally close up. In fact, actually, what you can see here is sort of bits of sawdust flying down, because this is one of these shots which is in the workshop outside, where I think a piece of wood is being scraped back by a power tool, and then this is sort of bunch of sawdust flying down. One of the things I learnt many years ago is if you are doing family shoots, if you're doing day in the life shoots, if you're doing shots of anybody, you're out there kind of doing a bit of photos, if they've got a pet, if they've got a cat, if they've got a dog, try and get a shot of it. You know, when you go back to show them the photos, the fact that you've got a shot of their dog or their cat or, you know, whatever other creature that they've got that they love, that they feel is part of their family, always goes down well. Even if you were never commissioned for it, it was never asked about, was never mentioned, always worth doing. And the other thing to remember for those of you who've never really done much in the way of pet photography is get down to their level. You know, I mean, it's one of those things that just to remember. Some of you, of course, obviously already know this, but for those who don't, if you're photographing children or you're photographing pets, drop down to their level. And once you understand it, it's really obvious, but you'd be amazed how many people for whom it actually, you wouldn't be amazed. All you've got to do is look at the 10,000 photos that appear on people's Instagram and Facebook feeds to know that most people don't realize this. So what they will do is they're looking down at the child or the pet, so they take the photo from here because that's how they've always seen them and it's never occurred to them otherwise. But the best way to get the most effective way to get a photo is to actually get down and get level with the pet or the child. I mean, I remember this. There's a landscape photographer I know, and I remember the first time he showed me some wedding photos. He'd done some wedding photos for a friend. Now, my landscape photographer friend is about 6 foot, or just over 6 foot tall. And I suddenly realised when I was looking at all these wedding photos that he'd taken them all from the vantage point of being 6 foot tall. So he was sort of slightly looking down on everybody and every room that he went into, apart from 1 or 2 people who were taller than him. Most people tended to be slightly shorter than him. So, and it hadn't properly occurred to me until I saw this. But then, being a landscape photographer, he's used to taking wide open landscapes where if you're 6 inches low or 6 inches high, it doesn't make a great deal of difference, to be honest. So, it had never occurred to him to the idea of changing his position. This is how he saw the world. So he photographed it from this position. But it's less effective. This idea of, take a photo of the dog, by getting down to the level of the dog, it becomes a much more effective, you feel like you're there with the dog rather than just looking down on it. Lisa says, great point. Thank you, Lisa. So this one here, this is Phil in the workshop. So in the large building that we saw earlier, one half of it is given over to the workshop, and this then is I've worked my way through some of the piles and walkways and what have you, and I'm looking back at Phil's making some notes on the cutter here, and I kind of tried to move around a little bit. I'm kind of looking for shape. I'm shooting diagonal at him with this one, so we're looking into the shape. I've kind of moved left and right a bit, so we've got this chunk of wood over here on the right, but we've also got these planks on the left, so he's kind of being framed by the wood that's in there. And so in that sense of what we're trying to do with our photography, I'm just using all these tips and tricks and techniques that we've talked about many times about framing your subject. What is the key narrative? What's the key narrative point that you're trying to make here, and how do you emphasize it? And so obviously the key bit is Phil here, but he's within the workshop. So we need the workshop, and then we're trying to emphasize Phil and not lose him. So we're framing him slightly. And then I've highlighted and darkened a little bit subtly in the editing to enhance this notion that our eye gets drawn to Phil. We see Phil straight away, but then our eyes kind of spread out and take in the rest of the scene as well. We get this sense of this very busy workshop. VG says, good point, because about seeing the dog from its level. Okay, thanks. Thanks, VG. This shot, however, is much closer in. This has a very different kind of feel to this one. This is your kind of establishing wide shot. This then is much more about Phil, and he's making notes, he's scribbling down. In fact, I think at this point he was starting to make a drawing of a pipe that's going to be going up from a multi-fuel stove or wood burner stove, but it's got to go up. Where it's got to be positioned doesn't fully line up with where it's going to exit up above, so it's not going to be a straight pipe up. It's going to have a kink in it and move across, and so he started to just make a quick sketch on that, if I remember correctly. But it's a different, here what you see is he's involved in in making his notes, and the workshop is there now as a kind of supporting environment. It's much more about being close in with Phil. Then this same kind of, here we've got, he's just about now to take the piece of wood and push it through, and here we've got your lovely use at your risk. Again, he's not wearing chainmail gloves. There's probably certain health and safety bits and pieces which some people might throw their hands up in horror at. But again, what you've got is I mean, Phil's 80. If you're not going to trust him to do it now, it is one of those things where you kind of realise the world we live in, and we can get so caught up with everything's got to be kind of wrapped up in cotton wool and kept safe, whereas people are just kind of getting on with things most of the time. This is from the other side. So here what we can see now is, you know, some of you will be noticing the photographer's approach. You know, that what I'm doing is I'm moving around looking for interesting angles. And so you can take this kind of shot where, you know, so now I'm looking down the length. We've got, you know, the wood is about to be pushed into the saw. So, and then the obvious next thing to do is you go for the wide aperture and then you just zoom in a little bit. So now the attention is on the tip of the piece of wood as it's coming through, and the rest of it is moving back. And it gives that kind of feel, that sense of this piece of wood coming towards you. And it's about the wood. This is about the wood as it's being pushed through, whereas this is about the man about to push the wood through. So there's a difference in emphasis. There's a difference in the narrative point that you're putting across. And to come back to this notion of the interesting, fun part of doing something like this is your brain has to react quickly. Each shot requires its own set of technical, you know, narrative points. What is it you're trying to convey? So in this one, you know, I've got you know, probably a 2.8 or a 3.2 max aperture, whereas this one, obviously the aperture is much wider, is narrow, is probably something more, at the very least a 5.6, possibly more. And so knowing how your technicals, knowing how, you know, when you need a wide aperture, when you want a narrow aperture, when you want a fast shutter speed, when you want a slow shutter speed, when you're going to need a high ISO, and all these shots, I will say, were all very high ISO. In the workshop, there's bits of natural light, there's bits of overhead light and what have you, and it's perfectly light enough for us to see by our eyes. But in terms of you know, camera settings, you know, we were up at, you know, I don't think there was any of these shots in here that were less than 4,000 ISO. I think a few even went up to 12,000 ISO, 12,800. So, oh, what's this? Oh, Stacey's joined us. It says a little late this morning, chilly morning and cloudy. Glad you could join us, Stacey. Here we've got now a shot where Phil is, you know, creating this. He's now cutting a piece of wood sideways. He's, you know, sort of measuring things up to put into a place. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to get a side to fit into a piece of wood here. And you can just sort of see underneath, he's got this shape of wood, which later on he basically turned into a little book stand with a lamp on it. So it's this sort of wonderful thing where you've got this kind of burr of wood, and then there's a shelf, and then there's, you know, and it's a really beautiful, amazing thing. But what he knows what he's doing, and he's now trying to cut it and lay it and get it cut to size so that he knows what's going on here. But again, so this is from the other side then of the workshop. And then this becomes one of those just little playful shots where, you know, these are legs for a stool that he's created. And using curved wood and that cut and everything. And then Phil's there in the background. So again, this is shallow depth of focus, probably an f2.8 or something like that, where I'm focusing on the texture of the end bits of these wood. And we're changing the emphasis again. But, you know, we've still got the kind of creating leading lines up to an outer focus fill in the background. But it's about that notion of finding bits of wood. And it's sometimes these detail shots. It's that other chance to really go in and play with the detail. You know, when you want to play around. So, you know, then I went over to one of the other benches here. And here we can see a lovely, amazing piece of wood. Which he's going to turn into something. So, you know, it's kind of part of a root system or branch system or something. And then it's been cut smooth because something's going to be done on this side. But then he's also created, this is, you know, a carved turned leg or support of some kind here. But it's just sitting on the bench. Here's, you know, drill ready to go, piles of sawdust kicking around. And But for me, I'm looking at the shape of this, and we've got these kind of diagonal, the diagonal on the left of the piece of wood here, slightly echoed by the diagonal of the strut in the background here. We've got the vertical coming down here. We've got the drill bit just sitting ready to go. We've got all this dust, sawdust kicking about. And so again, it's just looking, what do you find interesting? And that notion of the great thing, the fun thing with the camera, why part of what we love about photography is this isn't generally how you see things, but it's how you see things with a camera as a photo. When we have this amount of space, where do we place it? Do we go low? Do we go high? Do we look down from above? Do we look from an angle? Do we zoom in? Do we pull out? And all these different things create a different sense of line, form, and of course narrative. Coming in closer, get this sense here of, again, the drill bit with, and now we've gone, again, wide, whereas this is sort of, probably more like the kind of, f5.6. Here we're going back to the idea of a sort of f2.8 or f3.2, so that there's, very narrow depth of field, and now it becomes workman's tools, and it's, you're almost getting semi-abstract. Or here, where you just absolutely, now all we're doing is absolutely isolating the actual drill bit itself. And if you're then entering one of these photo crowd type competitions where where it's called numbers, great, there's a 38 on it upside down telling you the size of the drill, or it's called workman, or it's called tools, or something like that, then this is the kind of thing which generally does quite well in this. The background is completely out of focus. We've isolated this in the same way you might isolate a robin on a stick in the woods, and just little bits of sharp focused sawdust, and a lot of it piled out. So we're able to kind of really get in and play with this as well. There's lots of opportunity to do that kind of thing. Right. Okay. So with that in mind, where are we going? Yeah, do that. Come back here, I think. Right. Hopefully I should be with you on screen now. So that's what I was going to do now. So I thought what could be a little bit of fun was I'm going to attempt to do a poll again, just out of curiosity, just as a little bit of fun here, which is, so if you had the chance to go and spend a day with Phil or whatever, or be in that kind of environment, what would you most want to kind of be able to photograph? Would you most want to would you feel like just drawn to be out into the woodlands and taking photos of bits of trees and bits of wood and any wildlife or anything that happened to be there? Or would you be wanting to kind of really be diving into the workshop and taking shots of drill bits and wood and sawdust? Or would you want to be really kind of taking shots at Phil working and that kind of man at work, hands into things? So I'm going to attempt this now with a little poll, and so hopefully this is going to work. So the question, ask a question: if you were in a place like this, what would you most want to be photographing? And then I'm going to then click now add an option, the woodland, the workshops, or Phil at work. And then I'm going to hit start poll. Now, if I'm lucky, you should now have something that's come up here on your live chat bit, which says, if you're working in a place like this, which would you most like to, what would you most want to be photographing? Is it the workshops, the woodland, or Phil at work? So it's just a little bit of fun here. I'm just kind of curious. What's your kind of key priority? Because obviously, I mean, I know that everybody's got different ways of kind of approaching photography, and some of you are very people based, some of you are very kind of woodland, kind of outdoors based, some of you are kind of more indoors or kind of still life, or some of you really love your kind of abstract or your macro. you're kind of getting a sense here. What I'm doing, of course, is I'm going right across the board. I'm trying to take photos of the woodland. I'm taking photos of his dog. I'm taking photos of Phil at work. I'm taking photos of his workshop. I'm doing macro. I've got a full range of stuff, but I'm just kind of curious here as to how everybody else would kind of react to this. So while you're kind of putting that in, I'll just do a quick reminder here that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways that you can do it. So you can always support these podcasts that way. Also, a little reminder that if you are wanting to stick photos in for the challenge or for feedback, because next week we're doing a feedback session, we'll mention that again at the end of the podcast, then send them to kimayrespodcast@gmail.com, the specific email I set up particularly to get images to. Now, you can also stick them into the Facebook group or the Flickr group if you want, but emailing me, especially if you're wanting feedback, and you can then email me, as well as your edited photo, the unedited original, whether that's a raw file or at least a large unedited JPEG. Send it to the kimayrespodcast@gmail.com is the best place to do it. And then I've got that email set up specifically for it. That makes life a little bit easier. VG says definitely the workshop and Phil at work would be my first and second. Finally, the woods if we have time for it. Okay, so hopefully then, this is your last chance to go and click your little your entry on the poll. Like I said, and actually for anybody who's watching the recording of this, there's, leave it in the general comments. I know you can't join in the live poll as we're doing it, but I'm still kind of curious. What is it you would mostly, if you were in a situation like you were down at Phil's, in Phil's bit of woodland and workshop and what have you, what would you be most drawn to? Would you be wanting to be out there photographing the woods, getting the landscape, the light coming through the trees, bits of cut down or fallen down trees, close up of wood and moss and things like that, or maybe even looking out for squirrels or other kind of wildlife? Would you be wanting to be in the workshops and seeing the sawdust flying and getting shots of drill bits and little bits of strange wood? Or would you be wanting to actually kind of be taking shots of the man at work, of Phil? Are you kind of drawn to the people and the action? And I just always find it wonderfully fascinating how everybody's got a slightly different eye and slightly different what they're drawn to. And in a way, that kind of it's that notion of sometimes people get so hung up on the tools that you're using, the camera setting. Every year at Spring Fling, I get people coming around and saying, they look at a photo and they go, what were your camera settings on that? What lens were you using? What camera were you using? As though if they were there with that camera, with that lens, with those camera settings, they would have taken exactly the same photo. And yet, I know full well they wouldn't. They would have taken a completely different photo because their eye is different. What attracts them is different. And that's something like this situation where you're spending a day with a woodsman and furniture maker in this environment. Everybody here, if we went there en masse, if we went there with 20 of us all together, everybody would be busy photographing something else. Couple of shots might overlap, a couple of people might find something interesting, but generally speaking, we'd all be walking home with quite distinct portfolios. Marcy says wood grain and burl are beautiful. Each tree is uniquely beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Right, okay, so I will now, where's the stop the poll bit? So if I click there, end poll, and then see what that tells me. Is that going to tell me anything? Okay, so what we have is, if you were at a place like this, what would you most be want to be photographing? 60% we have the workshops. At 40% we have Phil at work, and then nobody for the woodland. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Poll complete 10 votes. So 10 people took part. 6 of you voted for the workshops. 4 of you would have been photographing Phil or work, and nobody's bothered about the woodland. Interesting. I think there's a couple of regulars that are missing from here on today's live podcast who I think will probably definitely have gone for the woodland. So yeah, that's kind of fun. Okay, so actually, one last thing, just while I'm here, is actually a quick thing on before we move on to the next set of photos. Is a quick update on the Smug Points for those who are still following. And where are we with the Smug Points? Oh yes, so far March for that we've for the last couple of weeks. heading at the front, at the lead here, are Gunilla and Anton, are both sitting on 35 smug points each. And Marilyn and Aydin are sitting at 30 smug points. So that's where we're at. And of course, if you happen to be watching live now, leave a comment. You get 5 smug points added to your running total. The person who gains the most smug points by the end of March gets to choose next month's topic. Next month's key topic and the challenge. So, now next week we are having a feedback session. So if you put in an image for feedback and it gets used on the podcasting, you get 25 smug points. So major boost to your smug point accumulation. And then the following week will be the headshot challenge, where you get 10 points if you stick your image in for the Smug Points Challenge. And then there are bonus points to be gained if there's a crowd vote, and then there's my kind of top 3 as well. So plenty to play for. Everybody's still in with a chance at this point, especially while Gunilla happens to be in the lead, she hasn't turned up today to leave something. So whereas Anton has. So this means that currently from today, Anton's just going to start slipping into the lead. So start thinking tactically and start thinking about getting your images in next week for the feedback session. Meanwhile, Lisa says, I find woodlands difficult. Yeah, again, it depends what you're drawn to. And there's no right or wrong in this. There is no right or wrong, and there's no need to feel less than if you don't particularly get drawn to one kind or another. It's like wildlife photography. I'm really bad at it. Most of my wildlife photography tends to be of the backs of animals as they're disappearing into trees or flying away. And slightly out of focus. That's not my speciality. I don't have the patience to sit there for hours on end waiting to get the right moment. Likewise, my landscape photography tends to be slightly less than, because I can't be bothered to wait for the sun to come out from behind the cloud. And I certainly can't be bothered to get up early in the morning to watch a sunrise. So, I'll have some nice sunset photos, but I have very, very few decent sunrise photos. So what we take photos of is very much tied into our personality, what draws us and what doesn't. But as I say, the likes of this kind of thing, where you're there all day, really gives you a chance to try different things out. So I'm going to show you some more photos here now. So as well as Phil's indoor workshop, he has an outdoor one. So if I flick over to here now, you'll see what we've got here is, so on the side, in fact, actually, I can, if I just go back to this shot here. So what we're talking about now is this over here. So here's his main building, and though those indoor ones were on the far side of the building, but now he's also got this whole kind of section that sort of stretches out, this covered area, and he's got for doing outdoor workshop stuff. And then when he's really got like all the sawdust flying, then you're in an outdoor environment. And so here what we can see is then that this is the case. So, and what I really liked about this is he's got this light up here which allows this bit of backlight. And as you know, it's backlight is always the photographer's secret weapon. When you've got a little bit of backlight, it creates this lovely little kind of edge glow on here, which separates out your subject from the background and has that kind of little rim light effect on it. When we combine that then with the main piece of daylight, that's the kind of, if you like, the key light that's coming in, it's interesting. Also, because of the way he's grinding down the wood, we've got all this sawdust flying up. And when you've got dust, fog, mist, particles, then you really have to get the light. If you've got a light behind it, then it really creates an atmospheric feel to it. So, all this stuff here, which if he didn't have that light on and we only had the light coming, the natural daylight, then these particles either wouldn't show up so much or would actually, a bit like flicking on your headlights in the fog, the light gets bounced back at you rather than it kind of coming through. So that's kind of fun. Again, Phil's not worrying about having a proper mask and breathing equipment and all the rest of it. It's just the way he does things. So, and actually all this sawdust flying down here, I think this was about the same time I took that photo of Wally that I was showing here, where you can see the little flecks of sawdust floating down. So Wally was just kind of wandering around underneath at that point. within that, then here's, you know, another angle with slightly different tool where he's kind of grinding down the burr and what have you. Again, the light now kind of catching a bit here. And this shot is all about the notion of the compositional line. So the way that he is curved, you know, the shoulder curves around here, his arm comes in here, but then the whole wood bit here is curving around underneath. So you get this sort of line that curves around. And then we've got this little bit of lead pipe, or you know, not lead maybe, this little bit of piping down on the right here as well, which is then, and a little bit of wall, and that's kind of bouncing you back in, so that we end up with this sort of shape that keeps us revolving and turning back in. So do you remember that notion we've talked before about kind of containment, where if you're not careful, depending on where your leading lines are, sometimes you can have shots where your leading lines actually shoot the eye out of the photo, and these don't tend to be as satisfying as photo in terms of photography. But this has this sort of satisfying that whenever you start kind of getting to the edge of the photo, it sort of bounces you back into it. So, and then because again we've got the diagonals, we've got the from the slope of his shoulder, the angle of his head, the angle of his arm, the curves of the wood, the use of the tool, everything. We've got all these strong diagonals here. There's this real sort of sense of energy and movement in it. Marcy says, oh, I chose Phil, that's presumably with the on the back on the poll, because his whole presentation brought back memories of Grandpa. Thank you. Yeah, lovely. Marilyn says backlight works great. Excellent. And then of course we've got the hands up, the hands-on close-up kind of shot there, and these are always kind of good ones to really kind of get your teeth into, you know, or like this, where so these kind of detail shots, you know, at this point, you know, the spinning hard is this real kind of, you really get that you can practically hear the machinery, the tool, you can see the dust and the, you know, spilling out, and you really kind of have that involvement of something being made, and it is quite incredible. I mean, to go back to here where you can kind of look, you know, just look at this shape of wood here, and this is where he then places that flat piece of wood to create this little shelf for books, and we've got these little legs that are curved out the bottom. You're getting a sense of it, and it's so handcrafted. You know, it's as far removed as a flat pack you get from IKEA, or, you know, something you buy from some ordinary furniture store. This is real handcrafted, artistic, you know, it's amazing to watch, and it's amazing to get that sense of what he's doing. And so as a photographer, you're trying to get a sense of, you know, that's what part of what you're trying to communicate here, the shots of the workshop, but also these kind of close-up hand tools as well. Now this is Shawnee. Now, Shawnee also creates furniture, works the same kind of, uses the same tools, and Shawnee lives in the grounds as well. There's Phil in his main bit, but there's also a hut up in the woods, which Phil built when he first turned up, and he used to live in that until he built the kind of main building, and now I think Shawnee lives up in the other one. I think that's right. Shawnee's great, very quiet, unassuming. At least he was while I was there. Somebody else is going to turn around and say, no, he's really loud and out there. Not my understanding of Shawnee. But actually, Shawnee's also, you know, my understanding, you know, quite quiet, reserved, not so comfortable in front of the camera. But again, because I'm there all day long, it just kind of relaxed and stopped worrying about it. And what I like about this photo, and the next couple of photos I'm going to show you, is you get a sense of a piece of the furniture that's being worked on. And so here we've got Phil and Shawnee. So we've got this chair, basically this stool, which is currently upside down. And just look at this back piece of wood for the stool. And in fact, actually, let's just go on to the next one. Here you get it. Here you can see it. You know, this is the kind of furniture we're talking about. This is not a stool you just go and buy in your local store. This isn't the kind of thing you get a cheap $5.99 from some, you know, so this is so beautifully handcrafted. It's just it's astonishing. You know, yeah. But so this is the one that Shawnee's working on. I will say at this point, actually, I have a love for the roll up hanging out the corner of Shawnee's mouth. I think there's a lost art of, I mean, most of you are of a particular who are watching this are of an age where, when we were younger, practically every workman you ever saw, whether it was a plumber, it was a joiner, it was even the bloke at the garage filling your car with petrol, had a cigarette or roll up or something hanging out the corner of their mouth while they're operating. Yeah, you just don't see it these days. I tend to feel it's almost like lost into a bygone era. I mean, I guess if you drop this particular picture into black and white, because that in itself would suddenly make you think the picture itself must be about 50 years old. But anyway, that's kind of a little thing. But the key thing here, so again, you've got this sort of sense of an interaction of what's going on between the two of them. It's still a moment. It's a moment of calm. We've had, the action shot. Now you've got a moment of calm. Emphasised kind of by the fact that the verticals are stronger. And then, like I say, when this way around, you can actually get that much better sense of what the furniture is like. This photo here, as you can see, I've gone cinematic with this. It just lent itself rather beautifully to that notion of the cinematic. What I love about this is we've got, both of them are looking off to the left. We don't know what they're looking. Even the dog is looking off to the left. There's something going on just out of shot, and we don't know what it is. And again, got Shawnee here having a cigarette. And just everything's kind of moving you over there. And I love that kind of, when I talk about cinematic photography, is that there's either action, anticipation of action, or reaction to action. There's a reaction and anticipation or something happening. You don't tend to have just the still moment unless there's a feeling of it's a response or an anticipation of something happening. And this has that whole sense of it's a response to something that's happening out of shot. And actually, this is what's happening out of shot. So this is Ed. Ed doesn't live on site, but Ed is up there an awful lot. So Ed is also, in this case, he's building a fence and he's taking the top off a fence post. And I just love the way all the kind of wood is spewing out the back of the chainsaw. And I think it was Ed's Land Rover converted car, which Marcy was talking about earlier. Now, this photo is a picture of Phil. I do have, I did do two photos in black and white particularly, and these are inside. This is when we were indoors with Phil, like either having a cup of coffee or having lunch or getting ready for lunch or something like that. And basically ISO is absolutely whacked up to 12,800. I'm maxing out on absolutely everything. The light is so low, fine for the eyes, no good for the camera. And then it's a yellowish light inside. So color wise, the noise was getting really quite ugly in that sense of a color photo. So, even then it was still quite dark. So I had to brighten it and pull up the levels and do all sorts of things in the editing. And essentially the color was so ugly. I thought, well, but I still wanted the shot. I liked the shot. I liked the fact that Phil's looking straight at us. But the color just wasn't working. So I used the old trick of drop it into black and white. I've used noise reduction software in Photoshop, but then what I've done is I've put it into black and white. And I think it works much better as a black and white. Meg likes the diagonal of the gate. And here's another black and white one as well. Similarly, light was really low, but it's a kind of fun one as well. Here this one, I've forgotten the name of the dog. It is Ed's dog, the guy with the chainsaw doing the fence. And here, this is Phil preparing lunch for us. And I just like that idea of just like looking down the length of the kitchen side of the room. If you go through that door at the back there on the left, that actually takes you through to the workshop. Detail shots. Love this old kettle with the bits of you can see the kind of shiny copper just underneath where the blackened bits are sort of, it gets black from being used and then bits peel off. But there's, again, this is that kind of thing where you're thinking photo crowd, guru shots, view bug, online competitions, picture of a kettle. these kind of things always go down well. So these kind of detail shots, you're noticing, you're kind of just isolating. And then finally, to finish off my set here, this is one where we're sitting at the table, and this is Phil, and he's got his dog Wally just sort of sitting there with him. He's finishing the stovepipe sketch here. We can see that, with the kink in it, making little notes as to where it's got to be done. And you've got the man in his living room. It's a living room. There's a corner which has got couch. We're sitting at the table. Just behind me, from the angle that I'm taking this, we've got the kitchen area. So it's kind of one large room. There's a big, over on the left, there's a nice big multi-fuel burner, log burner, that really heats up the place rather beautifully. And this I think this is one of Phil's favourite photos, to be honest with you, with his dog in his environment. So that's really that's what I kind of wanted to show you. Those are the photos, and it's that idea then to go back to the notion of that embedded photography, that insider photography, that hopefully what you've got a sense of with these photos is what it's actually like being there, not as a completely detached observer, but kind of being a part of the environment. So you're there, you're exploring the place, but there's no hostility. You are welcome. It's not even that you're welcome. It's just you're there. You're a part of it. Nobody's having to kind of think about it because everybody's just relaxed around you. And it's a wonderful way of doing photography. And it's a wonderful, and I would just so recommend doing this. Try it out. Like I say, if you know anybody who's a maker, or a baker, a candlestick maker, find somebody you can spend a day with and just kind of embed yourself. And it's a huge amount of fun to do that. So with that in mind, okay, let's have a little think coming up for the rest of the month. So next week then is a feedback session. So next week, feedback session. This is your chance to get direct feedback on your photos. So we go away, we do all our photos, and then some of them work and some of them don't work, and some of them we know why they don't work, and some of them they don't really work, but we're not sure why. Or maybe there's photos that we think work really well, but whenever we put them into competitions or show them to other people, we get more of a lukewarm reaction. So we know we're missing something, but again, we don't know what it is. And at this point, this is the point whereby send me your images and I can give you direct feedback. And there are very, very few places in the world, if not certainly on the internet, where you can get this direct feedback. There's places coming up now and now. There's a photography site I know where they now do AI feedback. Basically, you upload your photo and it goes, think about doing this in black and white. Think about doing this from a different angle. And it's so generic. It's quite horrible. But if you send your images to me, you get absolute personalized feedback. And the way to do that, of course, is send it to me, Kim Ayres, Kim Ayres podcast at Gmail. That will, and that's the place where you will get, so send me your image, send me your edited image, send me your unedited image as well, either a raw file or at least a full-size unedited JPEG, and tell me what you were trying to achieve with your photo, and I will do my best to help you with that. Got a comment here from Nevin Clark. Welcome, Nevin. Says, I reckon competitions are the worst way to judge the quality of your photos. I'm a professional photographer, and frankly, the judges that judge these are full of absolute trollop when judging images. Well, there's a lot to unpack from that. Many of them are because they don't necessarily know what it is they're judging. The same photo will do well in one competition, can do badly in another competition. I have actually done podcasts in the past where I've talked specifically about competitions, images, why they will work in certain competitions and won't work in other competitions. Sometimes you are up against judges who are just purely doing it on their own taste. I was at a camera club not too long ago where I was talking to the person who was sort of arranged for me to go and give a talk and judge a competition. And he said, I judge a photo by whether I would hang it on my wall or not. And for him, that was, is it good enough for me to hang on my wall? And I thought that was a very limited way of judging something, because that's not judging the quality of the photo, that's judging your particular taste. Whereas when I go and judge at competitions, what I try and do is go, well, what is it the person was trying to achieve with the photo, and how well have they achieved it? So you don't judge a picture of a squirrel next to a picture of still life next to a picture of a person skiing down the hill and say that's the better photo because I would hang it on my wall. You have to say, the person who's captured the squirrel, what were they trying to capture about it? The person who was capturing the person skiing down the hill, what is it they were trying to tell? Were they trying to get a sense of the action? Were they trying to get a sense of the lines? Were they trying to communicate the light? What is it, what that was special about it, and how well have they achieved it? And it's precisely this that I do with the feedback sessions. So, if you want feedback on any of your photos, then send them to this email address. Get it in. I've got room for about 4 for next week, so first come first served pretty much. So send me your image as soon as you can. And like I say, send me a raw file as well as the original, but tell me what it is you wanted to achieve with it, because this is really important. That if you just send me a photo and say, do you like it? Well, yes, I like it, or I don't like it. It doesn't tell you anything. If you tell me what you were setting out to do, then I can tell you what you might have done differently that would have enhanced, whether it's the way you took the photo, the settings you had with the camera, or how you've cropped it or edited it, or how you've drawn attention to by your highlights or your shadows or anything else like that. So like I say, very few places where you can get genuine feedback on your photography completely for free. Make the most of it. So that's next week, feedback session. And then in 2 weeks' time, we have the headshot challenge. So go back to last week, episode 281, and I went in depth talking about headshots, what they are, how to do it, all the things that might trip you up about it, the things that kind of, the kind of special kind of guidelines and particular aspects to headshots as opposed to general portraiture, all that. So if you want a reminder, go back to episode 281 from last week. And then if you would like to enter the headshot challenge, get your images into me within the next 2 weeks. So certainly no later than Friday the 27th. Ideally before that, because I need a bit of time to get these podcasts together. But then on Friday the 29th, by which time, for those of you who are over in North America, the clocks will have gone. Clocks here will have gone forward and will have resynced up again. We'll then have the headshot challenge. We'll look through the photos, see how everybody has approached it in a different way. And that will be fun. Right. Okay. So if you haven't done it yet, click like on the video that there on the down below. That's always appreciated. If you haven't subscribed, then subscribe. Click the notifications bell so that you know when they're coming up next week. And if you really want to support the podcast, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. Is one of the ways you can do it. And of course, invite your friends along as well if you think they might be interested. So that pretty much brings us to the end. Thank you ever so much to everybody for joining in the chat, keeping it going, and look forward to seeing you all next week. And for those that are sending in the any images for feedback, take care. See you next week. Bye-bye.